So to start the second half of the morning, we have Abubakar Sissoko, the head of Lean, Center of Excellence with Discover Financial Services, and he's going to share with us how OPEX can thrive in the age of regulation.
Thank you. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Maybe it is the topic, that's why people are not here. Regulation and lean. Think about what that could mean. Let me just ask a question. Last year, BCG did a research on how much financial institutions have paid in fines since 2008. And they came up with a number. Anybody want to volunteer how much you think that was? How much financial institutions have paid in fines in the last 10 years or so? Well, less than 10 years if they did the research last year. Anybody? Roughly? Just take a guess. 50 billion, I hear. 1 billion, what else? Anybody? 321. Absolutely right. $321 billion. How do you know that? Smart man. $321 billion. Absolutely, that's how much they pay. We are process engineers. We're Lean Six Sigmas. We're here to eliminate waste. Think about what that means in terms of opportunities, what we could be working on. $321 billion as how much financial institutions have paid globally in the last 10 years, right? Anybody from Credit Suisse? Good guess. So I'm going to pick on them, right? Because we all had our fair share, right, in the US of all these issues. Credit Suisse paid in 2014 $2.9 billion out of those, right? But when you think about what happened there, they were actually really facilitating tax evasion for 22,000 American citizens. 22,000 American citizens, and this has been going on for years. They've been doing that. But is it really Credit Suisse who caused that, who made that happen? It was only 8 employees. Only 8 employees, right? And when you think about this issue across our organizations, it is really not the company itself. It's not really Wells Fargo itself. It's not Bank of America. It's not Discover. It's really a small number of people inside those organizations doing these things, right? Who would want to work for financial institutions who's being fraudulent in their activities? Nobody would want to do that, right? So what does that mean? Let me stop there for a second. I'll come back to that question. And let me talk about my personal experience and who am I. So my name is Abubakar Sissoko. I started as an industrial engineer working for a small manufacturing plant out of New Haven in Connecticut. And my first job there was an regular, typical industrial engineer, facilities engineering, process engineering, writing work instructions, and so on. But one thing that I noticed when I was working there was the amount of inspectors in that plant. They made aftermarket parts, right, for Napa. They had inspectors in the beginning of the process, incoming inspectors. They had what they call process inspectors. They had outgoing inspectors. They had inspectors all over the place. That's what I knew. That was my first job out of college. Then later on, I got hired by General Motors. And if you recall, General Motors was part of the NUMMI project with Toyota. So they were just learning the Toyota production system. I fell right into that. And when I came to their plant, I asked, where are the inspectors? That's what I knew. How are you guys going to achieve quality if you don't have inspectors? What they did was they had built-in quality at the line. There was no inspection. They didn't have inspectors at the beginning. They didn't have inspectors at the end of the line. Inspection was inside inside the station, right? And later on, I took a trip to Japan, Nagoya City. Anybody ever went and took a trip to one of their plants? Amazing experience. As we were benchmarking the Toyota plants and we were walking around the shop floor, once in a while, music was playing. Every once in a while, you heard something like jazz music. And I said, what is this? What's going on? Found out it was actually the operators, when they had an issue, they would pull the andon cord, everything stopped, music was playing. I said, why music? I said, on a dance floor, why music? They said, well, because we want to make sure the operators are given the time and the comfort to solve problems. And then we had a number of American engineers with us, because every once in a while we heard music and said, well, you guys, seems like you guys have a lot of quality problems here, because we hear music all the time. He says, yes, but there was no repeats. We went to a dashboard. There was no one problem which was repeated, because they gave the operators the time and the thinking to run plan, do, check, act at their station. PDCA was being done at the workstation. Fast forward, I moved into the service industry. I moved into finance. My first job out of finance, I saw lawyers all over the place. I said, what? I thought I'm coming to work in finance, not to a legal firm. They had compliance lawyers. They had lawyers all over. And I said, what do you guys do? What do you do? Well, we're the ones who are actually making sure that rules, regulations are enforced. How do you do that? Well, we want to make sure that we inspect, internal audits, and so on. My mind went to what? Inspection. They had first line of defense, second line of defense, third line of defense. Do you guys have those in your organizations? Financial services, right? People who are actually inside the business units, making sure that the regulations are being complied to. People whose job are like the quality inspection people outside of the process is called compliance. They're the ones who take the regulations, the rules from the outside and make sure that they're built into the organization. And then you've got people at the end of the line, every once in a while, doing what? Internal audits. Can't survive like that. You got to build it in. That's where coming back to process being agnostic, I think what we are problem solvers. We go in, typically, we apply DMAIC, Agile, now we talk about safe, scale, Agile framework. Doesn't matter about the methodology. Look for the problem and solve it. When I started at Discover in 2010, what I saw was what I just described to you, where we have a number of people doing this. And we also had a lean department, right? Made up of many black belts, master black belts. I'm one of those master black belts, right? So we had those people running projects. But I said, we have a bigger problem. We have processes that are not fail-proof. We have a problem trying to find rules into these processes. So I started a personal journey, which is exactly what I'm going to describe, what I'm going to share with you. Again, I don't claim this to be the answer. What I want to share with you is my personal journey at Discover, at least in one of those areas that I think we're adding value and that the company is really taken on very seriously. Because one of the things that I think we, as Lean Six Sigma experts, process engineers, process experts, what have you, what we need to be really looking for is the right questions to ask. I come to these shows not really to find answers, but to really ask the right question. And the question that I asked was, how can we use OPEX to solve for regulations? People told me, what are you talking about? Using operational excellence processes to do that? I said, yes, that's exactly what we're going to do. So we started off with this vision. What you wanted to do is create a framework for continuous improvement by establishing standards which help us deliver measurable performance. So one thing that I noticed was going on was that we were doing lean demake projects, right? And what happens when you do demake projects, typically in the financial services? Current state, future state. Most of our projects end up like that. We always do a current state process map, right? We do all our analytics and so on, we end up with a future state process map. And we do our FMEAs and so on, right? But what happens if you go and look at that project 2 years later? That future process has changed, has evolved. And most of us do that in what? In Visio. I like the guys from Microsoft that came here and talked about Visio. But quite frankly, I'm glad that they're playing catch up and they're democratizing the whole process of process modeling. But a few years ago, they were not thinking like that. It was what? Very static. Current state, future state. Years later, you come back, that future state has changed. I said to myself, this is not the right tool. We got to find another tool. And what I found was, in our organization, we had something called BlueWorks Live, which was IBM, BWL. But we were using it to do automation projects, right? That's all we were using it for. When I studied the tool, I noticed something great about the tool, that it decoupled the process design. It decoupled the whole process of process modeling and taking that process modeling and moving it into automation. How many people are using BlueWorks Live in their organization? I don't work for IBM, right? But the truth is, they have a great process where that process, that first part of it, anybody can use it. That's process discovery. It's the same as mapping a process in Visio, except you can put in data. You can put in metadata, a lot richer in terms of putting metadata. And that process now can be turned into a BPMS file, which you can upload into Process Designer, which is the automation engine, right? Then I said, this is the tool. This is the right tool. Then I embarked on this whole thing of business process excellence. But I knew that in order for me to be successful, I couldn't just do it for the sake of compliance. I had to be beyond that. I have to have an overarching strategy. And this is what we started off, right? So we started off with labor-intensive processes that were dealing with regulation and compliance. So here's the area of typical lean, real-time analytics of processes in operations, document storage efforts, identifying business challenges into value added. So I looked at it from a holistic perspective, right? And then we started putting together what that journey map would look like. Where do we start? Centralization was critical for us, right here. Centralizing all the processes within one business unit, right? And start the next level of standardization was the next thing, then governance. And we started going into this circle. This is an iterative process. We did a lot of plan, do, check, act in this area, and we said to ourselves, if we don't get this right, we'll never get to this level. Within here is all the things related to compliance. Because think about what it is. Like I said earlier on, what does really compliance mean? Anybody? When we talk about in financial service being compliant, what do we mean? What's the best definition of compliance in the financial services? Very simple. We talked about simplicity. Say that again? Follow the rule. Absolutely. That's it. A rule, somebody's rule. Follow a rule. But how do you follow a rule? How do you follow a rule? Build it in your process. Make it error-proof, right? Easier said than done. Why? Because you had the two people, the two organizations which are handling this working in silos. The compliance people waiting until the process people do their thing, then they come and try to inspect and follow the rule. How do you build the rule within that? That's really what this is all about, the whole governance, right? Then continuous improvement and process automation. We also knew that we wanted to follow a certain, there's a lot of models here, right? The CMMI model, you can use that as a reference, but we wanted to build our own model of maturity within the thing. So we wanted to make sure, what does initiation mean, right? This was going on a lot, right? This is where we wanted to focus. We wanted to get to this point very quick, which is organizational business governance achieved by implementing a standard of how we document our thing, right? What I try to do when I deliver this is try to make it really tool agnostic, because it's not really about BlueWorks Live. You can use any other BPM tool, even now with Visio, now that they're catching up, quite frankly. Actually, 3 years ago, I met them at a conference, and I told them you guys were behind. I told them what you need to do is democratize your process model. I'm glad that they use that term. Democratize your process model. Separate those two, right? Make your processes more, they're catching up, and I think they're doing a good job. Because think about it, how many people don't use Visio in their process map? How many? Most of us use Visio, right? They shouldn't be here today, preaching about, their thing. So again, I don't want to be too critical to the Microsoft guys, but I think they're playing catch up. But the point is here, is really focus on this for us and then get to the next level, right? So in process standardization, again, you have centralization, standardization, governance, and continuous improvement. So this whole area of procedure management, visual process management, workflow management is really where we want to get to. And then how do we build it in this thing called DMS, Discover Management System? One of the things that we've done at Discover, since 2000, we've been doing Lean since 2008. And I think we're one of those financial services companies who really do have a strategy in how we do these things. We started off with projects, now we're going into business process management, and now we're going into Lean management system and calling it our own DMS adoption, right? But to get to the crux of the matter with the time that is allotted to us right now. So if I'm here, this is where I want to get to as quickly as possible. It's really about organization-wide adoption and making sure we're linking our processes to processes across the business unit, building that infrastructure. The key risk indicators linked to business units and having this 360 view of processes and having a BPM governance. What it does for you is that once you achieve, especially this area right here, once you're in this area, right, and going from here to here, it's about making sure your source of records, your source of truth, which is Archer, which is what we use typically for our source of records. When rules are being driven in this process, you have linkage into BlueWorks Live, and you have a dynamic processes that's going on over here. So all your CRM tools, right, whether it is Salesforce or SharePoint, all of those are being linked to that, to this linkage, so that you're having one. Yes, the rules are being affected there, but you also know where the impact is taking place. So that's really where it's happening for us over here, and making sure then we go to this next level, and then using SciPop, right, in order to do our RICSA process, right, at a higher level, and then linking it down to the businesses. So that way, the processes, anytime you have a rule, anytime you have a regulation that is impacting different processes, you have one area that you can click into to go into different things. It's all about what? It's all about sharing data, looking at the data. Right? So we use continuous improvement as a result, as a way to do this. This is a PDCA. Every time we assess our processes, the maturity of our processes, we develop a plan, we deploy, we monitor, and we sustain. And we go on to the next level of PDCA continuously. Right? Today, we're around here. Okay? It's very hard to get started. Right? It took us a lot of effort to get started. Right? Because when we were here, getting the businesses just to be on board in terms of outside of the actual risk teams, just getting everybody else, the first line of defense to get started was very hard. But I think today we've achieved alignment across the enterprise, right? Everybody sees that this is not just about risk, that in order for us to really drive regulation at the business unit level, what we need to do is build in the process, just like what happened in the automotive industry. Start building it at the, within the process. So something to think about as we move forward in terms of data going from static to dynamic, right? When you think about what really you get out of an OPEX, a BPM tool or OPEX program, it's really about a successful OPEX program. It's about what? It's about collaboration, going from static to dynamic. Think about if you were driving, right? You're using a map as opposed to using GPS. How much collaboration do you have with people that you drive with, right? As opposed to having one map. You're all seeing the same thing. And then as time is going on, it will also inform you on what? On where traffic is, as opposed to having a map. Really, that's what this is about. But I think one thing we need to think about, as being here is also what's next? Where do you go with this data? We heard about Bitcoin, or more correctly, we heard about blockchain, right? As a way to manage data. We think about it externally. But can we apply blockchain internally, right? Are there ways, what are we talking about? Regulation to the right people. How do we get the right business units to actually start following the rules that we want, right? Can we get to a point where we can have a private chain between two business units, where we can have legal bringing in, using this process, of course, and then taking that data into a blockchain to another, right? So these are the kind of things that where we are thinking, making it a lot more data-driven, a lot more, peer review in terms of process interface and data interface. That's kind of where we're heading. So I just wanted to share this with you guys as our own personal journey. I'm not saying this is the only way, one way to do it, but just something to think about. How can we use business process excellence with all the tools that we have in order to really drive or manage regulation? I think there's a lot of opportunities in this field. And again, I'll leave you with that number, $321 billion. So think about project selections. If you were to focus your continuous improvement efforts, where would you focus it right now? I think there's a lot of advantage in here. I think where sometimes we don't go in there because we don't see how to do that. I think one way to think about it is really through business process excellence. That's it. That's all I had to share with you guys. Thank you.